work. Come on, yeah, come on. It's like that. It's like that.
Durban, South Africa, a tourist playground and the host city for many top aquatic events. The Kings Park Pool facility is the venue for the recent African Diving Championships. It is only Egypt and South Africa that contest diving on a good continental level. These are the two countries competing here. These championships took place over 2 days and featured the 3-meter and platform diving events. The president of Africa Aquatics, Dr. Sam Ramsamy, was in attendance. The preliminary rounds of the 3-meter board for women has taken place. We now look at the finals. Our diving commentator is Justine Hadra from Gauteng.
Here we have the Africa Continental Championship. This is the championship where the divers will contest for the Olympic continental spot for Africa. And we have 4 divers in this competition. In the final, 2 divers from Egypt and 2 from South Africa. Our first diver on the board is Zalika Matula, an 18-year-old South African diver who's currently at St. Mary's School for Girls. Zalika was doing a inward 2.5 somersaults in pike position. Didn't quite go the way she was hoping. It is a new dive for Zalika. And unfortunately, she didn't come out completely out of that dive. Our second diver on the board is Malik Taufik. She is from Egypt. She is a very young diver at 16 years of age. This is her first continental championship. And she is doing a forward 2.5 somersaults in the pike position. Very nicely executed, very little splash. And the marks between a 5 and a 6.5 range show that it was a satisfactory dive, that the judges are reasonably pleased with that dive. Next on the board we have Bailey Hadra. Bailey is currently on scholarship in the USA, and she has come to South Africa to compete in this continental championship. Bailey is 20 years of age, and she'll be doing an inward 2.5 somersaults in a tuck position. Very nice dive from Bailey. Very nice tight position. She went slightly over on the bottom, so in diving we're looking for a vertical position in the water, and that was close to vertical with a slight clip of her feet on the end. And again, scores in the satisfactory range. We have a good look there at our technical team who are running the table. Diving takes a lot of technical officials in order to run an event. And our judges, which are a combination of judges from World Aquatics, Egypt and South Africa, in order to get a fair result. Our technical difficulty was that Maha Amir from Egypt broke a swimming cap and needed a new one. So this is Egypt's top diver, Maha Amir, and she is also on scholarship in America, University of Florida. And she is doing an inward 2.5 somersaults in the tuck position. Beautiful dive for Maha, and the judges decided that that was a very good dive, scoring in the 7 to 8 range. In diving, in a major competition, we normally have 7 judges. And in order to get a fair result, we take off the 2 bottom and the 2 top scores, and we average out the score and multiply it by a degree of difficulty. And those difficulties can range from very low difficulties of 1.2 all the way up to 3.6 in male competitions. We have Zalika Matula from South Africa back on the board. She'll be competing a forward 3.5 somersaults. So that's 3.5 rotations in the air. On our forward takeoffs, what becomes really important is the hurdle and the stability of the hurdle. That's the running approach that you'll see Zalika doing. Zalika gets beautiful height off the board, but unfortunately I think she saw the water a little early there, coming out a little bit too early for the dive and scoring a bit lower than she would have hoped. Unfortunately, it's considered to be an incomplete dive if it doesn't go in a vertical position. We also have different positions in diving. We have the pike position, which you will see shortly, the tuck position, which you just saw Zalika do, the straight position, which is when they keep their body straight, and that is Malik from Egypt, and she is doing a twisting dive. So that was a forward 2.5 somersaults with 1 twist, and again slightly incomplete, so the marks are lower than an average scoring dive. Back on the board we have Bailey Hadra. Bailey is also performing a dive with a forward approach. So in a forward approach, there's a lot more that can go wrong, which makes it a lot harder. The board can double bounce you and cause a knee lock. And this is a forward 3.5, and that's beautifully executed from Bailey Hadra, and marks in the upper satisfactory range. You see a beautiful tight tuck shape there and a reasonably good entry. Round 2 for Maha Amir from Egypt. Maha will be competing the same dive as you've just seen Bailey do, except she will be competing it in the pike position. That means she will have straight legs. And beautifully executed there for Maha. Again, the entry is the last thing that you see, so she did have quite a clean entry there, which the judges have rewarded. Beautiful reach to the sky there, as you can see, gives her a lot of momentum on her spin, and she sees the water and puts it in. 18-year-old Zalika Matula back on the board again. Zalika is one of our up-and-coming junior divers. And that's a forward 2.5 somersaults with 1 twist. That dive has a degree of difficulty of 3.0, so it's one of the more difficult dives to compete, and she executed that reasonably well. I think she'll be happy with that. Zalika is an incredibly strong diver, and there are high hopes for what she's going to achieve in the future. Most of our South African divers are quite young at the moment, and they are still building up experience on the international stage, and hopefully into the next cycle for the 2028 Olympic Games. Malik from Egypt back on the board. Malik is doing an inward 2.5 somersaults in the tuck position. And she did a pretty good job at that. Quite a nice clean entry there. Nice tight tuck position. Again, probably slightly lacking on height, which is quite difficult to see unless you're watching the dive live. She also had quite a split tuck there, and it went a little bit over on the bottom. So dives are very difficult to control. You've got to see the water at the correct moment. You've got to kick out in a split-second decision. And if that is a second or two late, the dive goes over or is slightly under-rotated. This is Bailey Hadra back on the board. Bailey will now be performing a back 2.5 somersaults. Bailey until recently was competing these dives in a pike position, but due to a back injury, she has had to revert to tuck. And that is a pretty good dive from Bailey, scoring in the average to above average range. Any dive over 50 points in diving is considered to be, on the 3-meter board, is considered to be a reasonable score that the divers are pretty happy with. I know in the prelim, Bailey had a little bit of a problem with that back 2.5, so I'm sure she is pretty happy with the result of that. Watching it in slow-mo, we see lovely pointed toes, a nice tight shape, and a good reach to the sky, which all the judges will be looking for. So the World Championships in Doha happened in February, and all 4 of these divers competed at that World Championships, and we had a wonderful thing happen for Africa. Maha Amir, the Egyptian diver that you are currently watching in this competition, managed to reach the finals and actually won the bronze medal in the 1-meter competition in Doha, which was a record moment for Africa. So diving is one of our lesser known sports, and to see a diver rise to that level is absolutely fantastic for the African continent. Back on the board with her new swimming cap, Maha Amir from Egypt. And a beautiful reverse 2.5 somersaults in the pike position from Maha. That was a really beautifully executed dive. She had a lovely pike position, came out of the dive at a perfect moment, and that is exactly what we are looking for in a reverse 2.5 somersaults in pike. Back on the board, Zalika Matula. And that's the same dive as we have just seen Maha compete. It's quite interesting when you see 2 dives next to each other. It's much easier to decide if it's a good dive or a bad dive. And in Zalika's case there, she was just slightly under-rotated. And we call what she did there slightly hipped off the board. So you are using your hips to generate the speed, and that often happens if the board does something strange. Again, it's a very big DD, so you're talking about a 3.0 DD. So it's wonderful that Zalika, at her young age, is attempting to compete the dives in a pike position. Malik from Egypt back on the board. And there you saw a back 2.5 somersaults in the tuck position, and there you see evidence of a kick out that was just too early. She hadn't quite completed all the rotations, and that resulted in her legs hitting the water and the dive being very short. Back on the board, Bailey Hadra. Bailey is also competing a reverse 2.5 somersault in the tuck position. And there is the opposite example. We have a dive that went over. So in that case, Bailey was slightly back on the board. Another thing that the judges are looking at is where you land on the board. And the sweet spot obviously is near the front of the board. When you are back on the board, you tend to have to hip the dive up a little bit more. And although that dive was incredibly high, it went over on the end, hence you see the large amount of splash coming off her feet. Maha, who is very much ahead and the leader in the competition as it currently stands, is going into her fourth round of dive, a back 2.5 somersaults. She is competing it in the pike position. And a very well executed dive from Maha there. She manages to control the bottom. That comes with experience, something that you learn the more you dive. And Maha being 24, she's had many more years than the girls she's competing against to hone the technique. And that was very, very nicely done. She pulled that dive in. It looked like it was actually going to go a bit short, and experience shows that you can save a dive no matter what. And now we enter the final round of diving. And Zelika is completing her fifth dive, which is a back 2.5 somersaults. This is a new dive for Zelika. She's changed the position from tuck to pike. And she had such a nice start there. Unfortunately, she did push it back a little bit, which made the rotation quite difficult, coming out a little bit short. But that is something that will grow and develop, and I'm sure in a few years' time we are going to see a beautiful looking dive with a perfect entry. Diving is very much a sport where practice makes perfect. A lot of our girls from Africa compete in America and go to the USA, to colleges there, where they can compete in the college league, which is not something that we have in South Africa. Gives them a lot more experience, competition experience, which is vital. And there we saw Malak on the board with a reverse 2.5 somersaults in the tuck position, unfortunately coming out way too early and resulting in a very short dive. And you can see there that she had quite a split tuck there as well, and her toes were quite flat in the position. So these are all things that the judges are looking at. Bailey Hadra back on the board for her final dive, a forward 2.5 somersaults with 1 twist, with a degree of difficulty of 3.0, so one of the more difficult dives. Let's see how this goes. Wow, she managed to pull that in off a very, very bad hurdle. You'll see that her arms floundered slightly in the air there, but she managed to still execute and pull off the dive. And a range of marks from the judges there, because some of them marked her down for what happened on the top of the board there, and others realized that it still ended up being a reasonably good dive. And our final diver in the final of this Continental Championship, Mahomia from Egypt, and she will be doing the same dive that you just saw Bailey do. Beautiful spin speed there, coming off slightly short, but she really does twist very, very nicely, and the judges have rewarded that dive. So nice camaraderie between the divers there, and Mahomia wins the Continental Championship for Egypt and the Continental Olympic place.
And there you have it. The bronze medalist from the Doha World Aquatics Championships is also the African diving champion in the 3-meter event for women. The young women make their way to the podium. Dr. Sam Ramsamy does the honors at the medal ceremony. Zelika Matula from South Africa is placed third. Bailey Hadra, also from South Africa, gets the silver medal. And our African Aquatics champion for 2024, Maha Amir from Egypt. A popular winner and very well deserved. Maha Amir also received the trophy for Egypt winning this event. Great smiles all round. We will feature some interviews as well as the men's 3-meter diving event on future programs.
Come on, get your head right.
You have been watching Super Swimmer. I'm Derek Alberts. Thank you for watching.
It's like that.